Hi, I'm attorney Andrew Thompson with the Thompson Law Office. In this video, we're talking about the upcoming pending fiscal cliff and the tax impact for small business owners. If you're a small business owner, no doubt you've been watching the news and it's given you some very frightening perspective on what may come. As we reach the final days of 2012, Congress and the White House have yet to reach an agreement, and the agreement they reach is very likely to increase tax rates on small businesses, especially the most successful small businesses. In fact, if no agreement is reached, there will absolutely be a tax rate increase across the board for all taxpayers. Hopefully something will come of this, but unfortunately the impact of rising taxes can be harmful and detrimental to your business, and it's very important to think about how to plan for your future. Now, this is not a political commentary, and it's not truly any kind of economic discourse in itself, but it stands to reason, and it's time-tested in history that increases in taxes, especially at a time when the economy is struggling, can do nothing but be more harmful on a macroeconomic basis. Nonetheless, the voters in our country decided to re-elect an administration that has made it part of its policy plan to go forward with tax increases, especially on the highest income earners in the United States. Any individual that earns approximately $250,000 a year or more will pay higher taxes. Now, this seems like it impacts an extraordinarily small number of people. About 2% of the overall population actually will be impacted directly on their tax returns. But the spillover effect, the trickle-down impact, if you will, hits just about all of us. I heard it said recently that for every $40,000 in taxes that a business has to pay, that means one job, one person, it either won't hire next year or it will lay off. And if you think about the tax structure that we already face, it's not as if the burdens aren't there. In just a brief summary, think about it. We pay taxes at federal, state, and local levels, often all on income. Not only that, in income taxes alone, you can pay income tax on your primary source of earnings, on business earnings, on dividends, capital gains, sales of real estate, and a variety of other sources of income. Add to that payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare. Not only does the individual earner pay his or her share of those payroll taxes, but the business has to match those taxes, or during the payroll tax holiday that wage earners have experienced the last few years, the business itself absorbs all of the payroll tax. So taxes are everywhere. They're pervasive, they're ubiquitous, and they're endemic. It's not as if you can escape them. And you can't escape them not only on income, but you'll pay sales and property taxes. And if you save and earn and store up wealth to pass on to your children and grandchildren, an estate tax will hit you. It's likely to hit you when you pass on. And that's a very important factor in the overall tax structure that we're going to face subsequently in 2013. For the last several years, after the so-called Bush tax cuts went into effect, we've had a very high estate tax exemption, at least very high on a historical basis. It reached its high point where there was a temporary abatement of all estate taxes. You may remember when George Steinbrenner died in 2010. But the estate tax exemption equivalent right now stands at $5 million. It's expected to be reduced significantly, but anyone that's ever owned a business, built it up, and then sold it or retired from it can tell you that by the time you build up $5 million, $3 to $5 million in wealth in your business, all you've done is go to work every day and be successful year after year for many years. So the estate tax is going to be have a very substantial impact on many individuals. That said, it's going to remain fairly high on a historical basis, and there'll be plenty of people who won't be impacted directly. But one planning tip that you may want to consider if you're in a very high tax bracket, if you have the wealth to pass on, is it's a perfect time to consider planning to pass on gifts and make distributions to your children and grandchildren to use up that estate tax exemption equivalent before it's reduced and you don't have it any longer to make use of. Okay, that's a simple planning tip. Now, the things that are going to affect many more small business owners are the increases in tax rates and limitations on deductions. It's hard to know exactly how to plan when you don't know what the outcome will be. It seems almost certain that there's going to be an increase of anywhere from 2 to 5% in tax rates on the upper 2 or possibly even 3 tax brackets at the federal tax level. When this happens, there's going to be an extraordinarily large sum of income tax that's going to hit those few people that pay it. There's also going to be a limitation on exemptions. Okay, so one other planning tip to consider for the end of 2012 is to recognize, to bring in, to absorb any revenue that you can this year, and think about moving expenses toward 2013. Actually, in the very short run, this, like the first quarter of 2013, for example, this may have a positive impact on the economy as businesses think about spending more to help trigger keeping their taxes at a lower level. The higher the tax rate, the more you're rewarded for spending your money or making the expenses rather than keeping it for yourself. But the challenge is, on the backside of everything, the ultimate goal of every business is to earn a profit. And as you earn more of a profit, you now pay not only higher taxes as you go, but at a higher rate. Okay, so that's something to think about. But again, we don't know exactly how to plan because we don't know all the nuances of the new law. There are plenty of other things coming into play in 2013 by way of new laws. The Affordable Care Act, the health care reform, also known as Obamacare, comes into full force and effect in 2013. And then the penalties actually don't necessarily apply until 2014, but the requirements for coverage begin next year. Not only are there requirements of coverage by employers of companies that employ more than 50 FTE or full-time equivalent personnel, but there is also additional taxes in various places in the healthcare portion of the economy, such as a 2.3% tax on medical device earnings. Now, this tax hasn't been clearly defined. We've run into an issue in the last year and with the current administration on promulgating final regulations in certain areas. They're very, very difficult for the regulators to get their arms around and define exactly what it is they want to call earnings on medical device sales and in other areas too. But these final regulations are necessary in order that we can decide what's going to be taxed and know how to plan our business affairs. Finally, with respect to investment, and speaking again of final regulations, the Jobs Act, the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, is still waiting for the promulgation of final regulations on the promotion and advertising of new crowdfunding investment options for small businesses. While the Jobs Act allows for a securities exemption of sorts on multi-state investment offerings for companies that raise up to $1 million in a 12-month period, the final regulations have not come out that will instruct brokers and businesses on how they may promote those deals as they come along. There is a plethora of new laws and new issues facing our economy coming online in early 2013. Very wise for you to think about, plan for, and be prepared. At the Thompson Law Office, we devote significant energy to assisting small business owners with all their legal needs. If we can assist you, please give us a call today at 317-564-4976 or find us on the web at www.businesslawindiana.com.